Well, welcome to our first 2024 Saturday Matters program, the year where the word unprecedented is going to be in constant use. We're going to hear about a lot about why, and I really can't wait. The politics of insurrection, disqualification, and may we hope, conviction. So welcome to Barry Keene. And we're ready.
Karen,
And oh yes,
somebody tell
thank
us what's
you.
going on?
Oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
Why we're not in the auditorium? Because Carrie told me it's 58 degrees in there.
But why is that room so cold?
What's
And-
going on?
No heat.
Why?
Yeah.
Murphy's Law, it's the coldest day of the year, and if something can go wrong, it's going to. There's a problem with our thermostats, and maybe you want to explain it. You probably know more than I do.
No. So I'll just let you know, as Karen said, it was 58 degrees in there, so we're just trying to pivot so we don't have to cancel. It's not comfortable. It's worse than it was yesterday, which is not acceptable. The HVAC people are coming, but they're not coming until noon. So, and that still doesn't guarantee that the problem is fixed. So, it's warm up here. We're going to try to make the best of it, and I'll be here if we need any more chairs, and then the show must go on.
And it will. Thanks, dear. Thank you so much. We don't want to miss, and be sure you turn your telephones off. And Laureen, I don't have a mic for you because
That's what I wanted,
the portable mics do not work here.
that's what I wanted you to say.
Yes, so you can watch me struggle with the cord afterwards if you want to say something. Okay, I'll shut up and let this show go on.
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me in back?
Yes.
There's a volume on there. Do you want me to see if I can turn it up a little bit? Is it okay?
I haven't got the strongest voice in the world, so I hope it carries back there.
No, she's...
Earlier, with 2024 approaching, Karen Place and I felt it was essential for Saturday Matters to provide residents with some focus on the seemingly unprecedented events characterizing our times. I say seemingly because we've actually seen it before, and because the founders predicted it was coming. My original preparation involved a discussion of Article 3 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which I'm sure some of you have inadvertently committed to memory by now. And that discussion was to be informed by the scholarly presentations of politically diverse Harvard professor Lawrence Tribe and the esteemed, faithfully conservative jurist J. Michael Ludwig. I hope some of you have seen their presentations. But then the Colorado Supreme Court acted to affirm the view of the constitutional scholars that Donald Trump is an Article 3 insurrectionist, disqualified for becoming president. Maine, the state, through a different process, reached the same conclusion. A large number of other states are holding the question in abeyance until the Supreme Court acts. And it's a politicized Supreme Court that will consider it and is predicted to cynically reverse that decision. What has become evident is that holding a former president accountable in a constitutional democracy is no small task. nor is following, let alone comprehending, the diverse pieces of legal and political machinery in play. Perhaps the first important point is recognizing that the huge volume of information you're bombarded with daily needs to be viewed on a split screen. On one side of that split screen are the legal issues. On the other side are the political questions. Often the commercial media tend to conflate the two. I'm not sure if it's because they're lazy or for some other reason, they just don't get it. For example, Trump's outrageous contention that presidents are totally immune from criminal prosecution looks like a legal question, when really it's a political one. It's designed to create appeal opportunities in an effort to delay Trump's prosecution until after the election. I say it's not a legal one because can anyone believe a president can legally assassinate political opponents? Or sell pardons? Or reveal military secrets? With no accountability. Well, to begin, my analysis this morning goes something like this. What's the magnitude of the threat facing us? What's the probability of it happening? And how might we address it? The magnitude of the threat if Trump wins, is almost beyond imagination. It reminds one of a self-soothing attitude among persecuted Germans contemplating voluntary exile in the 1930s. Many stayed, even after concluding that Hitler was a nut job. And they said, what's he going to do, kill us all? Well, history's given us the answer. There's an outstandingly informative issue of the Atlantic magazine under the rubric of If Trump Wins. I've made handout copies of the cover, just the cover, for reference, and you can pick them up as you leave. But buckle up if you plan to acquire it and read any of that January-February edition of the Atlantic. I'll just touch on some highlights. Trump has threatened to overturn democratic rule. And the others in his party are not stopping him. Trump has threatened to suspend the Constitution. Think about what that means. To strip government of anyone imposing any guardrails. There were a few that did in the last Trump administration, but they wouldn't be there this time. He's determined to make sure of that. Trump has threatened to embrace Putin, to abandon Ukraine, and to dissolve NATO. Think of what that means. He's threatened to use the army to suppress any protests in American cities. To ignore climate change, which we're experiencing today, maybe. He's a chronic liar and a lawless menace. So that's the magnitude. But what's the likelihood of a Trump victory? Some say very likely because of the peculiar operation of our electoral college. Presidents are chosen in America by an electoral college that effectively relinquishes the outcome to voters in a half a dozen swing states. So your votes, the votes of fellow Washingtonians, and most other Americans don't count at all. They're wasted. Currently, Trump leads in all those swing states. But that may not be the biggest threat. There's another factor irresponsibly, in my judgment, irresponsibly ignored by the mainstream pundits. And it's this: if no candidate gets a majority in the Electoral College because of the existence of third-party candidates, the matter is decided by a Republican-dominated House of Representatives, and Donald Trump, a would-be dictator, becomes our president. Well, who are we talking about when we talk about third-party candidates? A well-known Joe Manchin, a senator from West Virginia who's been the pivotal senator, or a Robert Kennedy Jr. who has the right name, could win some states and would get all of the electors of those states. Now, you may say that that doesn't happen, but it happened because Teddy Roosevelt did that, Robert La Follette did, George Wallace did, Strom Thurmond did, and those presidential elections were not close enough among the top two candidates to deny either of them a majority in the Electoral College and throw it into the House of Representatives. But the election upcoming could very well be that close. If it is, say, welcome back to President Trump. So what do we know and what can we say about what's happening and what might happen? Let me wander a bit outside my comfort zone. Concerning predictability, the brain scientists suggest most human learning occurs from brain mechanics tied to cause and effect observations. Where are the scientists when we need them? We believe what happens once is likely to repeat itself under similar circumstances. We believe what happened yesterday is likely to repeat itself tomorrow. So confronting the current political threat to our society, is it truly historically unprecedented, as everyone says it is? And the answer is perhaps not. Many of you are familiar with a Latin expression, o tempus, o mores. In English, idiomatically, it means shame on this age and its lost principles. The phrase was used in 63 BC by the famed orator Cicero, who was a leading Roman senator. Today, Cicero, in his orations against a man named Catiline, another fellow senator, Cicero might be called a special prosecutor, like Jack Smith today. So Catiline, a fellow senator, was accused of being an enemy of the Roman Republic. Catiline, like Trump, was a member of a wealthy patrician family. A lot of power. He had a rich father from whom he benefited. In 73 BC, Catiline, like Trump, was prominently prosecuted for sexual offenses against a Vestal virgin. And again, like our former president, Catiline called for political violence against, in fact, the assassination of several elected officials. Eventually, Catiline was deposed and subjected to harsh Roman law. But the main point is that Trump may not be as big an historic outlier as we think. He is a liar, but not an outlier. Cicero used the phrase, o tempus, o mores, as an expression of his disgust, to deplore the sorry condition of the fading Roman Republic in which a citizen could openly plot against the state and not be punished adequately for it. Isn't that where we are? Isn't Trump another Catiline? Isn't he the demagogue that Washington, Jefferson, and Madison so feared and predicted would be coming? But back to today. As stated earlier, our intrusive overflow of information is divided in a split screen between that which is relevant legally and that which is relevant politically. It's hard to keep track of the two and easy to conflate them. Some prefer the right screen, others prefer looking at the left screen. On the one side are those who say everything must be done to stop a would-be dictator who would suspend the Constitution. And therefore legal efforts to disqualify his candidacy must be pursued. Others temptingly say, let's just wait and give the voters a chance to decide. Isn't that more democratic than having an unelected judiciary decide? And they add that we don't need to agitate a mob wielding pitchforks. Not pitchforks, but AR-15s. Their argument is essentially that Trump is above the law because the consequences of holding him accountable are too scary. The first group, the constitutionalists, respond with this. What that would mean is that for the first time we let a voting majority decide, rather than a theoretically independent judiciary, what the Constitution says and what the Constitution means. Why then have a Constitution if any temporary majority can override it? Remember, constitutions are supposed to set forth the durable institutional structures of government, the foundation, the powers and limits of government, the powers and limits like the Bill of Rights. And if that's so, it cannot be subject to revision by every temporary majority that comes along. Accordingly, theoretically, interpretation is deliberately removed from politics and assigned to a politically insulated, therefore unelected judiciary. Theoretically. That's a legal argument if by remote chance it prevails with this Supreme Court, whose conservative majority is challenged by its well-established commitment to two things: to originalism or textualism and the protection of state powers. I'll elaborate in a minute. But there are fears that the public division that occurs if the Supreme Court does what it promised to do and what it's supposed to do could result in violence, even civil warfare. You might take note of the threats that are being administered by the Trumpians. Threats to judges, threats to election workers, threats that are apparently working to discourage people from creating opposition. But if we allow politics to nullify the Constitution, how are we better than a presidential candidate who threatens to suspend the Constitution, or even the Confederates who initiated the war between the states? So the big dramatic question is, enforce the Constitution or relegate it to politics? Which side are you on? My analysis of all the arguments against enforcing the unsurpassingly clear 14th Amendment disqualification clause is that they're not legal arguments opposing it, but political ones. Nonetheless, as I mentioned, most analysts believe the U.S. Supreme Court majority somehow will find that Trump cannot be denied access to the ballot. To reach that conclusion, they'll have to twist themselves into pretzels. And they're capable of doing just that. Because as suggested, it's inconsistent with two of their previous stances. First, that the Constitution must be interpreted textually, according to the plain meaning of the words at the time it was adopted. And that they must accord the same appropriate deference to the states provided in overturning Roe versus Wade, especially since the plain language of the Constitution places election procedures in state hands. Now, you remember after overturning Roe, they said, let the states decide. That's where the abortion rules should be decided. But here they say, no, we need uniformity. And a state that can outlaw abortion cannot exclude Trump from its ballot. Think about that. Disqualification would render Trump legally unelectable. Legally unelectable. Conviction would render him politically unelectable. And the polls overwhelmingly show that a criminal conviction by a jury of his peers would cost Trump the election. Here's why. Even conviction will convert a very few Trump voters. But the main impact will be among independent voters, particularly those that live in the half-dozen swing states that will control the official selection of a president in the crazy electoral college. In moving to discussion this morning, some of the more obvious questions. Should Trump be disqualified by a judicial determination of the Constitution's disqualification clause, a very clear disqualification clause? Is it probable that that will be the U.S. Supreme Court's decision, or the reverse? Or should we wait and let the voters decide? What if the Supreme Court judicially, or worst case politically, delays all the jury trial determinations, the 91 indictments, until after the election? Finally, how concerned should we be about the impact of third-party candidates? And can anything be done to avoid a disastrous result? Well, I think that's enough for me. Let's hear from you. And please, although there are no microphones to pass around, please engage freely with each other.
Okay, Charlie, you have a nice big voice. Maybe we can hear you.
If Chief Justice Roberts were in this room, I don't think you would personally think anything you have said is incorrect. I cannot imagine that his judgment as he leads the court would allow him to permit the Supreme Court to permit the court to not stop the appearance of Trump on the ballots. Would you comment on this?
Justice Roberts, who contends that he just calls balls and strikes, that he has no political affiliation, and wants to have the court appear that it's not acting politically. You know, I've thought about that, and here's the situation. A 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court that says Trump can be on the ballot doesn't look very good, does it? But they don't need 6-3. They can get by with 5-4 and let somebody off the hook, and that somebody would be the Chief Justice Roberts. So he might go, as you say, with keeping Trump off the ballot. But because there's still 5-4, Trump would be on the ballot anyway. So they can let him off the hook, and that's just a possibility.
Al?
I'm concerned about the opposition, the Democrats. And last night they had, am I feeding back pretty bad? Last night they had a potential Democratic opponent to Biden speaking and saying he just was not getting the time of day from the Democratic establishment and everything was rigged. But Biden is looking so weak that I think the Democrats are just singing pleasantries to themselves and they're full of beans.
Can you comment on that? The apparent weakness of Biden?
Well, the people in the White House believe that he has been so successful, though it's not appreciated, that over the next year they can convince people that he's so far better than his opponent, his probable opponent, that he will emerge victorious. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I guess that's... I guess I should add that part of the problem is that the vice president is not all that popular, all that strong politically, and that people fear that because of Biden's age, he could drop dead and we have a vice president that the public doesn't approve of, and that affects their thinking. But the problem is if they drop her, they also drop a large number of minority votes.
Yeah, I wish they'd gotten their act together about a year ago.
Yeah, we wish. Well, you know, the argument that we should defeat Trump at the polls, the counter to that is we've already defeated him at the polls. So if he runs and does not win, are we going to have a repetition of election deniers and so forth? Is that going to be in the cards, you think?
Absolutely in the cards. He promises it. Stefanik, one of the Republican leaders, was interviewed the other day and just asked, well, if the election results are against Trump, would you agree that you'll go along with it? And she said, no, because it won't be constitutional if Trump loses. Now, she's supposed to be a bright woman.
Okay, Joe, can you,
I can be loud, yes.
okay.
There's a lot of speculation, but it seems like the Pentagon keeps iterating the military in our country is there to protect the Constitution, not some guy. And that was being said in Israel and they folded and so on and so forth. But if you want to continue with the speculation, would the U.S. Army say, yeah, let's go, we're head on the strong horse and fold like our brothers in Israel did? Or would they really just say, no, we do the Constitution, not the guy?
Well, that's an interesting... I wondered that myself. Do you have a thought on that? What if the Army decided not to follow their commander-in-chief?
Well, if the commander-in-chief was Donald Trump, he would try to take over the Army. he has the equivalent of the German brown shirts right now, armed as they were when they attacked the Capitol. He could take over the army as well as commander-in-chief.
Roger was it?
Right. Oh, okay. I could only see the lampshade, not you.
Yeah, Barry, my only problem with all of this, and first of all, as you well know, I am no fan of Donald Trump. But my problem is that we are disallowing him from running because of the constitutional provision against insurrection. He has not been convicted of anything. And if you listen to his speech on January 6th, he did not say, go to the Capitol and tear it apart. He was very careful. And so I just really feel that we're throwing aside the Constitution if we say we're going to convict this guy with no trial.
Well, the constitutional provision disqualifying him is not a conviction. It's a disqualification, just like being under 35 years of age is a disqualification. Being born elsewhere is a disqualification, other than in the United States. So if you promise to support the Constitution, taking an oath to do that, and then you involve yourself in an insurrection, you would be disqualified for the same reason as age and place of birth. That's the theory. Anyway, politically, if you come across politically, it does look like maybe it's a denial of democracy, but the Constitution was set up to be above what a temporary majority of voters decide the Constitution means.
If the court decides that it's up to the states, and therefore Maine and Colorado would not have Trump on the ballot, are there any pro-Trump states or swing states that are liable to follow Maine's lead?
Michigan? I hear Michigan.
Yeah. That could happen in Michigan.
Well, the other states feel that the Supreme Court will act and that therefore they shouldn't act, that they should wait for the Supreme Court. But there are a number of what are now called blue states that would deny Trump an opportunity to be on the ballot if the states were given permission to make their own decisions.
But would his disqualification on those ballots affect the outcome, since he was going to lose anyway in those states? All he would need to be is on the ballot in those states that he's either expected to win or that are swing states.
That's a good point. I would think that that there would be enough states who would decide that he doesn't belong on the ballot, that he could not win an election. But I guess that's disputable. That's debatable.
Would the issue of whether Trump actually was sufficiently supportive of an insurrection still be an open question? It seems to me that's not absolutely clear as what an insurrection is. We have just one clear example of it, and while the 6th of January was a very serious offense, it clearly doesn't rise to the level of the Civil War.
That's an interesting point, and I have a sort of related question. Would the definition of insurrection depend just on January 6th? Because there's a whole lot of other stuff he's done to thwart constitutionally mandated processes.
I would echo that point, and I don't want to superimpose my own thinking about it, but I can't believe that what he did both on January 6th, where he let everything go knowing exactly what was going to happen. I can't believe that that isn't lending aid and comfort to an insurrection. And if that were not enough, as Karen points out, what he did afterwards in attempting to supplant the ballots of the states with his own ballots, that doesn't constitute an insurrection. To me it does, but as I say, I don't want to impose my own evaluation of the facts. You'll have to decide for yourself.
Can you hear me?
Without the microphone.
Okay, well, in the countries where there's been a military coup, there's usually a horrendous division within the military. And I suspect we would have the same thing here.
Expects that there would be a horrendous division in the military, like has happened in other countries where there's been a military coup.
Well, if Trump wins, the commander of the Joint Chiefs, Milley, would be executed. So that gives you some hint as to what would happen if he became commander-in-chief. And without people like Milley around, you can guess the rest.
Charlie?
Mary, if I were a traditional Republican, which of course I'm not, I would vote against Trump this year because I would think that it would wreck my party to do so, to have a second Trump term. Do you think that
It's already
there
wrecked.
are enough people of that mind to swing the election to Biden this year?
You mean the anti-Trump Republican faction?
Traditional Republicans cannot want Trump to win in 24 because they think it would ruin their party forever.
I think they're right, but whether they...
It's already ruined.
Where are those Republicans? Why haven't they stood up to him yet? And why would they do so at election time?
Because they haven't had to.
Oh, they've had,
In the privacy of the voter booth, they can.
You know, it's become such a cult that I doubt that they are willing to assert themselves, even with the secret ballot. I doubt it.
The cult will stay with them. I'm not disputing that. But I'm talking about those that are not part of the cult that supported him in 2016 and 2020.
Well, I certainly prefer your position that there are anti-cultists and they're just in hiding right now, and they're going to come out when they have a secret ballot, but it's too optimistic for me.
I have a question, too. What should we be doing? These are unprecedented times. You know, all of us who have been politically active have done things like I used to work on campaigns. I don't do that anymore. Contribute to campaigns. other than the common, ordinary, usual citizen participation in electoral politics, should we be thinking about unprecedented and creative measures, since this is such an unusual, unprecedented, and creative, destructive situation? Does anyone have an idea? Do you have an idea? Oh, tell us what to do, please. I think, Lester, you had something you wanted to say? I'll bring you a microphone.
Can I be heard?
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to interject a possible positive note. Wow. The last election was stolen. Why can't this one be stolen as well? I am being
Stolen by the Democrats? Well, it hasn't worked for Trump so far. Well, maybe we should all just be thinking about what should we do. Debbie?
Well,
I want to follow on your comment, Karen, and go back to your comment, Barry, about the possible reality that our votes will have no meaning whatsoever. It's going to be very hard for me not to vote and to take your comment at face value that it will do no good if I do. But I, like Karen, have the same concern. What can we be doing? And I think we have to vote. I mean, I think that's imperative. That's just my feeling.
Seems like one issue is the House of Representatives, who would could be involved in a indeterminate election or other election fraud issues. Perhaps what we should be doing is focusing our attention on electing Democrats to the House of Representatives.
Yeah, good idea.
Would they be there in time?
Yeah, when would they be there in time? And here in Washington, are we even going to have a chance to vote on anybody for the House? No.
get voted at the same time.
Yeah.
Let me start with Debbie. Where do you vote? What state do you vote in?
This state, Washington.
In Washington.
Michigan.
Michigan, okay. Your vote may count, Debbie's won't for president, but there are all the other offices and reasons to vote. But I have to say, it just doesn't count for president. Doug, if in 2024 you had a third-party candidate that prevented one of the top two candidates from getting a majority in the Electoral College, it would go to a Republican House of Representatives, the existing one. Unless a couple of them die off between now and then.
Well, let's not go there.
Could we facilitate that somehow?
They may take care of it for us.
Barry, would that be the current House or the new?
Peggy had her hand up first. I'm going to see if I can, I don't know if I can get,
I just wanted to follow up on
The current House.
I just wanted to know whether it's the current House that would decide or the newly elected House.
The current House.
yeah, the newly elected ones wouldn't have been sworn in yet.
I'm not sure idea. So when we're asking what we can do, one suggestion I have is that there are several groups that have you write postcards to prospective voters, and you can pick what state you would like to have these sent, and they send you a script to fill in, just to send a postcard. At least I've been doing it the past several elections with Arizona, so I choose to send to Arizona voters. They give you a list of people who vote Democratic but do not vote in every election. And it at least they have some statistics to suggest that this has an effect on a certain percentage of voters who need a little enthusiasm to give them a push to go to the polls. So if you would pick some of these 6 states that are key states, send, for me, it's 200 postcards. You can send as many as you want. You know, if you want to do 400, 600, but it's something we can easily do. We have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of physical abilities, speaking for myself, but if you are interested in the group I have connections with, I can send you a link, but there are several that are doing that technique. I just want to suggest it as something that could have a little bit of an impact. Did you hear me?
Yeah, yes, did you all hear that? Peggy, would you please put some information about that in our newsletter?
All right.
Thank you. Okay. Lester, did you? Yeah, okay.
I would just add to that, we all have our family members that, and others that we're in communication with, and once in a while we can slip in a little plug for sanity.
At the risk of family harmony. Yeah. That's a dicey one. Anybody else? Henry?
Barry, I would just like to ask you if you could give a percentage probability in your judgment as to whether Donald Trump will be inaugurated on January 20th, 2025.
As a famous American once said, prediction is pretty hard, especially about the future.
Yep.
I don't want to hear.
Has anyone got a crystal ball? I have no idea. I don't know where I would place my bet. I'd be very worried whichever way I place my bet. I just...
Yeah, prediction is much harder about the future than the past.
Yep. Nancy?
This is just going back to the military. My thinking is that when people enter the military, they take an oath to uphold the Constitution. And I wonder if there was any way that if it came to a question of military, if somebody could remind members of the military they have done that.
They might get executed like a certain general who reminded us of that. Comment on that? Barry, you gave us, oh, okay.
I think I can speak loud enough.
Okay, good. Give it a try.
Barry, I'm just asking you, how sure are you that conservatives on the Supreme Court are going to vote the way you're afraid they will? I'm not so sure.
I'm fairly certain that they will not keep Trump off the ballot. I'm fairly certain of that. I would bet heavily on that side.
I'll bet. I'll bet.
Well, Barry, thank you.